So I recently hit level 50, and at the time I had roughly about 150 gold across my account. And that got me thinking that if I was going to have 1,000 gold by the time I hit level 60, I was going to have to trade off some of my efficiency in experience gain to make some gold along the way. Now, obviously, if your mount at level 60 is a big goal for you, then there is probably a lot more efficient ways of getting that gold once you've hit 60 rather than trying to get it along the way. However, I decided that I wanted to have the gold when I got to 60, so I ditched questing that I got a little bit sick of and went for just raw mob grinding. So I explored a few different locations. My last video actually was at a location for lower level brackets, and I found this. Now, this is a farm in Azshara. I will pop the map up on the screen for you here. And this has to be one of the simplest mob grinds around. Now, the mobs we're killing are these blood elves, and these blood elves are really weak, both in terms of defense. You can tear them down pretty quickly, at least as a physical class, and also in terms of how hard they hit you. They do not hit very hard at all, so you're pretty much able to chain from one mob to the next. Now, there are a few things that I want to point out about these mobs. Firstly, the location itself is quite far from the flight point, and to my understanding is fairly far away from any sort of vendor as well. So you do want to make sure that if you are doing this with the intent of making some gold, that you have plenty of empty bag space and are fully repaired before you make the journey up here. Now, the mobs themselves come in two forms. There is one that is going to cast fireballs at you as well as heal. Now, these tend to be relatively easy to deal with. Simply interrupt or stun the casts whenever you can and move on to the next mob. Generally, the mobs are going to die quickly enough that one interrupt is going to prove to be sufficient. If you are struggling for kill speed, it may be worthwhile simply either coming as a group or to come back when you are at a higher level so you can kill the mobs a little bit quicker if you're having problems with interrupting the spells sufficiently frequently enough as to prevent the mobs from healing to full health or killing you. The other type of Blood Elf mob that you'll find here, pretty much just melees. Now, the one caveat to that is that they do seem to have this sort of AoE detonation that they do, which, as far as I can tell, has no animation in its build-up, cannot be interrupted, and simply just goes off. Now, this can hit quite hard. Now, it doesn't tend to be that much of a problem if you are appropriately leveled and geared. However, there are some packs where you could find yourself pulling multiple of these mobs at the same time, and at that point, it does sure build up, especially when they go off in quick succession. You can start finding yourself panicking a little bit that you might find yourself soon visiting the graveyard. Now, obviously, if you're a high level and you're doing this just for the gold, chances are that's not going to concern you. But if you are a lower level and these multiple packs are something that's potentially quite scary to you, then do just consider skipping out them and just staying for the mobs that you can fight individually, unless of course you are a class that doesn't really suffer for fighting multiple mobs at the same time. Speaking of multiple mobs, there are plenty of mobs here for you to be able to continue this farm if you are at a level appropriate kill speed without finding yourself running out of mobs, providing that you take a reasonable route of pathing. However, if there is other people here, you can find yourself a little bit mob starved for the farm. But generally speaking, in the time that I have been playing, obviously this may be different for yourselves, but I have not had any issues with regards to other people being here and taking all of my mobs. At least not generally speaking. There was one occasion where there was a level 60 here who was farming for gold, and he pretty much annihilated everything because he was already Molten Core geared and he could just pretty much one-shot these mobs. And that did prove to be a problem for me. However, he only stayed for about half an hour. I went and had some lunch, came back, and then he was gone. Other than that, maybe one or two other people at roughly the same sort of level, at which point chances are you'll still be able to sustain a good amount of mobs for both of you to be able to farm this successfully. And of course you could consider grouping with them if you are concerned about mob kill speed, and not as concerned with regards to your experience and gold per hour gains. Now, the results. So, I first started doing this farm at level 52, at which point I found myself killing these mobs at a rate that got me roughly 38 to 42,000 experience an hour, which is the medium that I like to use for a rough estimate of the efficiency of any leveling method that I am using. Now, when I did ding to 53, used my extra talent point, and more importantly had that extra level advantage over the mobs to reduce my miss chance and things like that, I did find myself going up to over 45,000 experience an hour just grinding these mobs. Now, I would say that for my level, my kill speed single target was actually very good on the majority of these mobs. So you may want to bear that in mind. Of course, some classes are going to beat me by default simply because they're a more efficient farming class. But of course, there are going to be some out there as well that are going to struggle a little bit more. Maybe they have higher downtime. The respawn here is quite fast, so if you are a class with a lot of downtime, do bear in mind that you may want to find yourself a safe location to have a drinking, because it isn't uncommon for mobs to be respawning on your head. Now, in terms of the gold that I've got here, like I said, I have done roughly about 3 hours of farming here, so that isn't the highest to mitigate for RNG, so maybe I've got lucky, maybe I've got unlucky, we can't really say. All I can tell you is that I have had 9 BOE greens in that 3 hours, which I personally feel is quite low for the amount of mobs that I've killed, but they have been quite high value. I had a recipe that sold for 8 gold, as well as a few others that sell in for sort of 5-6 gold, something like that. Obviously, if you get a luckier one, you can get a bit more. Maybe you get a bit more unlucky as well. And I did also have a blue item. I think it was a 2-handed mace. It looked a bit rubbish to me, but I threw that up on the auction house and got 20 gold for that as well. So there is certainly gold to be made here in those drops, but even better than that for me was that I have been getting a lot of rune cloth. Now, I appreciate that rune cloth is easily attainable from other sources as well, but this is one of the perks to this farm also. I can't think of any mobs that are easier to farm that drop rune cloth, so it might well be one of the easiest rune cloth farms, if not the most efficient. It is also worth noting that there are a couple of mining spots nearby. I don't have herbalism, so I wouldn't be able to comment on whether there are any herbalism spots nearby. And there is also a chest spawning location inside the camp as well, which could potentially increase your value here if you are staying for a long period of time where a chest might spawn. In conclusion, this has got to be one of my favourite farming locations that I have discovered in Classic WoW, and I would highly suggest to you that you do at least go and check it out. If it doesn't work for you, then it doesn't work for you. Perhaps you're just a class that can't do it very well, or it's just one that you don't like, and that's absolutely fine. But I do think it is worth checking out. Personally, I could see myself staying here long enough that I hit sort of the high level 50s before having to move on elsewhere because of the experience drop from mob level. But I'm hopeful by that point I'll have made a substantial amount of gold. One thing that I didn't mention with regards to the gold making is the actual raw gold value. A lot of these mobs are dropping like 6 silver plus just in raw currency into your bag, which is excellent, and they also don't however drop any grey items, so while this could mitigate the amount of gold that you make, it does also mean you don't fill up your bags very quickly as well. So those are other final thoughts that are worth considering as well for this farm. But that's going to about wrap it up for this video, guys. I do hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please do consider liking the video and or subscribing to the channel if you want to be kept up to date with any future videos like this that I bring out. I am hopeful that when it gets to the point, like I said, that I do have to move on from this farm to find a slightly higher level one, when I'm approaching level 60, that I'll be able to find a good farming location that I intend on bringing you for that as well. But for now, guys, that's going to wrap it up for this one. Like I say, I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, or if you didn't, let me know down in the comments below as to why, and I will look into adapting the video style to one that suits you guys a little bit better. Or, of course, if this works for you, then fantastic. But thanks, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Later.